Hi everyone, Nurse Phill here from Community Builders Show. I am very lucky today. We have an amazing guest, and I hope you're a bit hungry because we're going to learn some really good stuff and actually how we can actually help our clients so they can get actual nutritional meals. So, really good day today. I want to welcome Jennifer to the show, and she's going to introduce herself and tell us what we're doing. So, g'day, Jen. How are you?
Hi, Phill. I'm really well, thank you. Lovely to meet you.
That's great to see you. Thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it. Everyone in the community, we've got a couple of questions to ask you today, but can we start by what's your business name and how did you get started?
Okay, so my business name is Hoppy Indy Adventures, and I very accidentally got into this line of work. I'm a chef by trade and have been interested in health food for a long time. Myself, it's just been my lifestyle. And I was working in a soup kitchen back in the late 90s just as a volunteer because I was really passionate about bringing some healthy nutritional meals onto the streets for people doing it tough. And
Oh, onto the streets.
yeah, for homeless people. And
Did you
there
set
was
up
a
did you have a
pardon?
kitchen? Did you have a kitchen or a
Oh,
caravan or something?
we operated out of a church kitchen where we got all the food ready and then we took it out into the park. So it was something that we did for a number of years. In fact, that soup kitchen is still running today. It's called Vital Connection. It's in the Roma Street Parklands.
Oh, yeah, great.
But I have nothing to do with it now, and I haven't for many, many years. But um, when I was back doing it in the late 90s, there was an old man called George who had an intellectual disability, and he'd lived on the streets of Brisbane in a bus shelter for nearly 50 years. And he'd survived. He was an alcoholic, he drank methylated spirits and smoked, but he had an intellectual disability of he processed life like a 4-year-old, and he'd
Um,
survived on the streets for all those years. So I just took him into my heart and I adopted him and
oh,
took him off the street, got him off the alcohol, off the cigarettes, and he just became a part of my family.
oh,
So,
brilliant.
and the amazing things that happened while I was with George, just the things that he taught me about life, about people, just in his own simplistic way. He was a larrikin and he was a bit naughty, challenging at times. But I started my own business because I was really a full-time carer. There was no NDIS back in those days, so there was no money for anything like that. And George was 74 when I took him off the streets.
Oh,
So,
oh, yeah. He was
he held,
elderly.
pardon?
He was elderly.
Yeah, he'd had a very tough life. He'd slipped through the cracks. And so I started a health food manufacturing business. This is out in the scenic rim in Kalbarboona, out that way. And because I could see the changes in George of just belonging somewhere and having value and purpose, I started to then employ people with disabilities in my workplace and train them, younger people. So George passed away in 2008 and a documentary was made on George and I on SBS and it won some awards. So that was quite interesting. And as a result of that, I did a little bit of public speaking within the disability sector, just more about carers and the challenges that carers face on a day-to-day basis, living with a
Yes.
child with a disability. And then in 2014, I closed my business down, and then not long after the NDIS rolled out, and one of my staff members got a package and she rang me up and said, I'd like you to be my support worker. So that was I very accidentally rolled into NDIS work, but
You've
I
done
had
well.
so much experience with it. And
Yes.
I was one of the first sole service providers to register in Queensland.
Oh,
So 'cause
really?
I don't employ people, I just work for myself. But so I've been doing that since 2015, 2016. And in that time, I have just worked independently. I've worked with all different levels of disabilities and had some amazing results because I'm very orientated towards achieving the client's goals, not just indulging them in, taking them to fun parks every week or something like that. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So with like that's amazing. What's the name of the documentary for people to come and have a look?
I'll have to send you a link because it was made back in 2002. It was on SBS and it was in a series called Inside Australia, Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things. And ours documentary was the launch of it, the launch of that series. It was called The Trouble with George. But yeah, so we got flown to Melbourne for a special media showing of it, and George thought he was quite the celebrity. He absolutely loved that. I think it was one of the highlights of his life.
Yeah.
But look, I think there's something like a real piece of gold that I got from George that I have carried through into my, I guess, my belief and ethos in disability work. George had a ruptured gallbladder and he died of septicemia, but he was in hospital for about 4 weeks from the time of the rupture to his passing. And one day I was just at the hospital with him and he was still lucid. And I started just talking about our life together because 10 years I spent with George as his full-time carer, and talking about all the firsts in his life that we'd achieved together and all the fun times we'd had. And then at the end of it all, I said, George, tell me what's one of your happiest memories of the time that you've spent with me? And he didn't hesitate and he goes, mowing the lawn. And
Yeah.
I thought, how many people would put that as their list of things, of mowing the lawn as one of their real achievements in life? And I realised that this also, when I employed people with disabilities, the thing that makes them feel the best about themselves is when they're just like everybody else, when they're doing the normal things. And that's what they get value out of in the workplace. When I employ younger people with disabilities, they never cared about the money. What they cared about most was a uniform. That was what they valued, that they could walk down the street with a uniform on and it made them just be like everyone else. And to me, that's just a piece of gold. Like, isn't that all what we want, is value and purpose?
Yes,
And
exactly
they're
right.
no different. They're no different.
No.
That's all they want to.
That's
And when they're just, morphing into everyday life and being a part of that community, that's when they're at their happiest.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And that's when George was at his happiest, when he was mowing the lawn.
That's right.
Was it a Victor mower?
I think it was actually Phill.
Go the
But I
Victor.
know he loved
Yeah.
his lawnmower. He had his special pair of gumboots that he used to put on. And I can still visually see him mowing the lawn. And he was just in his element. And when he'd finish, he'd look at it and he'd probably ask you 100 times to rate how good it was. But he was actually a pretty good lawnmower, despite everything.
Oh,
But
brilliant.
yeah, but he just, to me, like things like decobwebbing the house and hanging the washing on the line, all of those things gave him value and purpose, and they were really important to him. If somebody went to do it for him, he'd get very angry.
Oh, would he? Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Yeah. So to show that he was independent and could do it.
yep. And
Yeah.
when I employed people with disabilities, we used to do a similar thing. Like, they were no different to anybody else in the workplace. They were part of the meetings. They were part of putting the input into improving things. But every person that worked there had a reward of their own choice to a certain value of money. And then they had a series, like a ladder, that they had to climb, in steps of achievements to get to their reward. And
Oh,
the people that were with disabilities were no different. They had their ladder and they had their steps and they had their reward as well. And in actual fact, some of the things that they did, even their parents say, I never thought that they could do that, you know, but when they're put in an environment where they're just amongst everyday people and their achievements were not as challenging as everybody else's, but it was challenging for what their ability was.
yes.
And it was amazing what they could do. They even, as I say, their parents would say, I never knew my child would be able to do that. But it's nobody's actually cracking the whip. It's just that they're in the environment where they want to prove themselves.
Can you give us an example of what a ladder looked like for achievements?
Yeah, so it could be, I was in a manufacturing business, so we made health food, we made health food bars, we made vegan, vegetarian pies, we did quite a number of products. So one, it might be like, how many labels can you put on these bars in an hour or something like that? And then if they could get that achievement up to a higher level, well, then they're up the next step of the ladder. And there might be 4 or 5 steps to get to your reward. So each one would be just a little bit of improvement on something that they already could do.
Yeah.
And maybe there might even be another step for doing something that they'd never done before. So,
Yeah, that's good.
And
Yeah.
it wasn't necessarily defined by a particular thing, but if you've achieved that, that's another step up the ladder, that you've done something that you never did before today, you know.
Yeah, that's
And
brilliant.
it's amazing how inspired and what people can achieve when you believe in them and you love them, really. Because even George, his psychologists and different things said they never ever knew that George could even live the life that he lived, that he was with when he was with me. And he defied the authorities. And I think when you put the right time and energy into something, you can always defy the authorities, you know,
You
because
sure can.
it's just the language of the physics of believing in somebody.
With George, because I remember you said earlier on, you're talking about challenges. Because one of our support workers are asking the question is, how do you deal with a challenging situation? And let me just check here. And what can you give us an example of what that challenge was?
Well, look, I can talk about that even more directly in work. I had a client who was in his he was in his 60s, and his mother had passed away about 10 years prior, and he was living with his father who had dementia. And really the two of them should never been living in a house together. And the father was very angry, used to swear a lot, and he used to yell at his son, and the son would yell back. So there was like a real pattern of anger and violence in the house. Now, this client had not had a shower or a wash in 2 years because all the support workers were scared of him, because he'd monster them. I don't know if you're aware of that language. It's when people, they just maybe non-verbal or sometimes verbal, but they get to a level of frustration that they can't express, so they go to hit you. And that's what they want to do, is they want to hurt you because they can't express what they're feeling. Well, in this situation, because of how the father was, the son was being like the father, even as an older person. And all the support workers were frightened of him, so that's why he never got a shower. So when I came in on the team, I just wasn't going to take no for an answer. And sometimes I had the father threatening me with golf clubs, trying to hit me, and then I had the son also trying to hit me. So that's a pretty challenging situation. And you know, like, I'm not quite sure, like, my original training, which I did with George, which is probably, I was told, is not appropriate. When George used to go to attack me, which would happen not often, but sometimes, I used to get a broom and I'd hold the sweeping end towards me and just the broom end pointing towards them, just so they can't hurt me. It just keeps a safe distance between us. And it used to work, but I think in today's restrictive practices, you're not allowed to use that because it's called threatening. But what I used to do is I just always used to make sure that I was near a table or something that I could run around, that they never really had. I'd try and keep an object of furniture between us, not in a threatening way. But I think the other thing is when you show your fear, they play on it. So my advice is don't be afraid. And when you look them in the eye and let them know that you're not afraid, they back down every single time.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's, I don't know, maybe you need a bit of practice at that, because sometimes people can be quite threatening. But look, if they're really, in all of these situations, they were people that I knew couldn't really hurt me that much. So my advice would be, if you were with a client who was really strong and quite physical, is just get outside of the house, away from them, and ring an ambulance. And that's the best thing that you can do.
Yeah.
If they get violent, if you actually feel that you're being threatened and you've got no safety mechanism, just get out of the house and call an ambulance. And I have had to do that before, but really you've got to just assess each situation. And there's also like mental challenging behaviours, like manipulative, and I think every single person with a disability has their own level of manipulative behaviour, and it's a matter of trying to find it and then work out a way around it where you're not giving in to the manipulation, but you're not engaging in argument.
That's it. How do you do that?
Yeah, well, once again, you've just got to, every situation is different. It depends on the client. It depends how they're trying to manipulate you. But I had one client, and all the time she just have to have the last word, and she'd go and she'd taunt you with, you know, nasty statements that would, she's just trying to get you to engage. So when she would be like that with me, I'd put earphones on, put music up loud in my ears, and I'd ignore her. And once she realised that there was no feedback in that engagement process, and often I'd even start singing, you know, just enough to let her know, you know what, I'm not really interested in what you're saying right now. And then she'd realise that her behaviour had to change if she wanted my attention. So, yeah, there's...
What sort of language can you use? Because it is a tricky subject. What sort of language do you use that isn't confrontational, but that sets you away from being drawn into the manipulation and having to do what they say, and being able to have your professional boundaries in there as well?
Well, sometimes it is about putting your boundaries in and saying, look, the way you're speaking to me is not appropriate. I don't speak to you like that, and I'm asking you not to speak to me the same way. So if you can't think of a way to talk to me nicely, I'm not going to listen to this talk. And it's just being firm, letting them know, no, I'm not listening when you talk to me like this. And don't. And you've got to be, when you set those boundaries up, you've got to be very consistent with them. Yes. So if they just keep going, that's when you put the earphones on and you just disengage.
And yeah, it's consistency is hard. I do see that we can do things a couple of times, maybe 4 or 5, and then after that it just all wanes and we're back to square one. So being consistent. How do you manage to keep consistent?
Well, I guess I just managed to, because I'm just one of those people, I guess, even with George, because he was really a very challenging personality, and with him I was having to keep the boundaries every day, sometimes more times in the day, and it's not like he's going to grow up and learn. that's 10 years of reinforcing the same boundaries on a daily basis. It's just a matter of being resilient, more resilient than them.
Yes. Well, 10 years is resilient. That is a
Yeah.
big
Yep. And I
challenge.
mean, even though he would know it, sometimes they just still push it out. And that's just sometimes the nature of the disability, but that consistency can wear you down sometimes, but that's where it's good to have breaks. And as support workers, you don't want to burn out. Yeah, because
Well,
as you start to burn out, it's much harder to try and keep those boundaries.
well, that leads on because I just I've got this one question here is how do you stop yourself being tired and feeling fatigued all the time when you're doing lots of shifts all the time, and that sort of leads into the burnout sort of stage, isn't it? What do you do to suppose manage that and recharge yourself?
Yes, well, I think if most of us, I guess, on this forum are independent support workers working for yourself rather than an agency, well, it's really good to just try and manage your own timetable and schedule so you're not burning out. And I mean, I've had times where that man and his father I was talking about, the father went into a nursing home, and when the son had to transition, I stayed in the house for 1 month to get him used to being in the house without dad. And there were still a couple of other support workers coming in, but for 1 month, I did 1 month solid of every day. So what I did after that is I think at the end of the month, I then trained other people and stayed on shift while the client got used to the new staff. And then I took a good 2-week holiday. No work, no nothing. And I knew that I would need that at the end of that time. So sometimes it's okay to set yourself up for, if it's for a particular reason and a goal that you need to do to get a client over a certain line, make sure you give yourself time at the end to recover. Don't come out of something straight like that and then try and keep up, the same work at the same level or even at 50%. When you've given so much of yourself to do something like that, you've got to give yourself recovery time.
So before you even went into that situation, you knew you'll be there for a month solid, and you knew you had your reward.
I had already booked my holiday for when I finished.
Yeah,
so
right. Yeah.
It was also, as I was starting to feel fatigued, I keep looking at that brochure and go, okay, I've only got this long to go and I'm there.
I'm done. And I can relax and recharge. Because a month would be hard. That would be mentally draining, doing a month's solid with one person. That's amazing achievement.
Yes, but it achieved everything that was set out to do. And in actual fact, I not only got this client showering back in the bath, as happy as anything, by the time I had done my job, all of his violent behaviour was gone and he was no longer a threat to anybody.
Yeah, okay, well done. That's a big achievement.
Yeah.
So other people could come and actually care for him and
not feel
look
threatened.
after him. Yeah, not feel threatened.
Yeah. So, but sometimes I can honestly say that it was a lot of my experience of 10 years as a carer that gives you the sort of wits to know what to do in certain situations.
What if you don't have that ability? Like if you're newer in support work and you don't have that experience, like with George, that would have been an amazing experience. What sort of things can they look out for to keep themselves safe and slowly? What sort of areas can they look at to improve their practice so they can get to that point in 10 years where they've got that knowledge base behind them?
Well, look, I think one really good thing, and I've done this with many of my clients, and I highly recommend it. If you're working with a client fairly consistently, it's really good if you can link in with their psychiatrist or psychologist if they have one. And often with people that are really challenging behaviour, will have a behavioural practice, and you can go through that and have a look at it. But sometimes you do need to engage with professionals to find out what is the best way to deal with this situation. I mean, we're not trained doctors or psychologists or psychiatrists, but when you're with a person longer hours, you see more of the real person than the psychiatrist or psychologist sees.
Yes.
But if you can link in with them, like often with some of my clients, I'll just email a psychologist or psychiatrist and I'll say, look, this is a behavioural problem that I'm experiencing with the client. You give them an example, and then maybe you ask them for some advice as what would they recommend as the best way of tackling it. And legally, then you're covering yourself a little bit because you've got some professional advice around it. But hopefully that the psychiatrist or psychologist has been talking to the client and is a little bit aware of their patterns and might say, well, look, when they're reacting like this, they're feeling like this. So perhaps don't do that, or don't do this, but do this, do that, you know, and that can be very helpful. But I kind of recommend that because you're legally covering yourself at the same time. And particularly if you do it via email, if ever anything happened, you've got some written evidence to show, well, look, I did reach out and try and get some help for this, and I did try this, and I did try that. And, you know, you're basically showing that you've done everything that you could without, you know, and taking in the professional advice as well, which the NDIS loves.
Yes. And that, and see, I see that a lot when we do our mandatory training days, is that like support workers out there, they're sort of do with what they know, but they don't know where to go to find that extra help. So like you say, going to the psychiatrist or the psychologist and getting a helping understand and linking with those environments, even if they're going to the dietitian or, you know, the community nurse or whatever they need, if they got wounds and stuff, and connecting with people that have that experience. If you don't have it, like if you don't have that 10 years, this is a great way to get it, is go out there. It's out there. It's out there. It really is. You just got to go out there and find it, don't you?
And I also think it is good, like if you're spending considerable time with a client, to get guardians' permission or something to attend appointments with the client, all appointments, because sometimes the clients aren't truthful. You know, they'll go to the doctor or the dietitian and say, yes, I haven't eaten any chocolate this week, and you've just watched them eat 5 blocks of chocolate. So if you go into the appointment with them, then you can take notes that you can share back to the guardians or the family if that's necessary. But the other thing is that you can sort of quite diplomatically weave into the conversation, but did I see you eating some chocolate the other night when we were watching TV, or something like that? And then you're bringing it up, and then you're giving the practitioner a much clearer picture of what's really going on. And then other times too is the practitioners give very professional advice to a person with a disability and have no code of conduct, or not, that's probably not the right word, not code of conduct, but they don't actually know how to word it properly so the person with the disability understands it. And so if you're in the room, you can take that information in, and then after the appointment, you can explain it to the client at their understanding. And I'll give you an example of that. I had a client who had to go to the QE hospital to do, she'd had a breast screen and some abnormalities came up, and they wanted to have it in the hospital for the day to do a series of screening and tests, to, you know, and they've got all the equipment there to do it. So we go into the first doctor, and she's taking x-rays and different things, and she explains to the client, I'm just going to take a slice of your breast. Now, What she was talking about was camera, talking with the camera, taking a slice. I've looked at my client's face with this look of horror, and I said, it's all right, they're not going to slice your breast.
Well,
You
that's
and
what you
I
would
get
think.
it,
Yes.
but they didn't. And the
Yeah.
doctor all of a sudden pulled herself up and said, that was pretty remiss of me. I didn't word that very well. But doctors are not necessarily trained in how to talk to somebody with a disability so they understand. So I do think there's a lot of wisdom in attending appointments, taking notes, and then either going back and relating it back to the family or guardians, but also so you can talk it through with the client at the level that they understand. And often it takes more time to do that than a standard appointment, because they might, you might have to tell it to them 10 different ways before they get it.
Yeah. And that's one thing too. So for the support workers out there is, if you're booking appointments with medical staff and things, you might need to go for the longer consult instead of standard consult. So they've got the time,
true.
and they've blocked the professionals have blocked that time out so they can spend that time. But if you come in and you've got a short time slot because you're doing a standard consult, standard consult won't allow for that time to be able to explain what's going on. And then everyone's feeling rushed and we're missing half the story, and we walk out and go, what was just said? And
that's right. It's also good to have your notebook with you. I never go to appointments without a notebook, even if you're just making dot points, but that covers you as well. And one of the other things is that you just may need to carry around with you is a consent form from a guardian, just allowing you to attend appointments, because you'll get some health practitioners that don't want support workers in the meetings. And that's a bit of a red flag to me, because if you're ethical and there's someone there with a disability, you should very easily let somebody like a support worker in. But if you just cover your bases by having a consent form signed by a guardian, if ever anybody wants to make a deal about it, you can just show them the consent form and they have to let you in.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That is a very, very good point. That is a good point. I was just got another question here. One of the support workers asking, what made you go down this road? I mean, we know that you found George. What was it inside? Did you have an attribute or something about you that wanted to give all the time? What was it that made you do these amazing things?
Well, I don't know. Look, I mean, in many ways, I didn't really come from the best background. I didn't have a good childhood, and I was very much on the outside of the perimeter myself. But I've got a strong personality, and I've never really had a bitter nature. In fact, all my life, I've only ever had a real love for people. But I think I had that bit more confidence and strength, that I could sit on the outside of the perimeter and still be safe. But while I was there, I saw the other underdogs that didn't have that strength to stick up for themselves. And because I just have a love for people, I've just always had that soft spot for people who really have lovely souls, but they just don't have the resilience to stand up to the bullies or to the people that may want to take advantage of them. So I sort of, even at primary school and things like that, I kind of wouldn't fight my own battles that well, but I'd go and bat for the people that couldn't bat for themselves, it's just a love of people. It really is. And I still have that real heart for people that just need a little bit of a hand up to be their best side of themselves. And that gives me so much satisfaction and joy to see that a person shining and being their best self, because some people, just through no fault of their own, have not had that easy life, that easy start, and they've been victimized, and they have never really deserved what the treatment that they've got from society.
Yeah.
So if I'm a part of their life and I can make that world a better place for them, that's the thing that defines me and gives me joy. It's just I can't explain it. It's just in my heart. It's there, and I know how it's fulfilled.
That's a great answer. That is a great answer, because it that you encapsulate everything that you've been doing. Because if you didn't have the heart for it and the love to do it, you wouldn't have spent all this time looking after, like 10 years with George, and spending a
Yes.
month in someone's house, making sure that they could adapt and learn to live by themselves, which is a major achievement. So no, that was a great answer. Is there anything else that you would like to tell the crew, our support worker crew?
Well, look, I suppose, honestly, I feel sometimes I could write a book about
Oh, I
all
think
my
you should.
experiences and different things. And yeah, I think that that's the main thing, is to be passionate about what you do, and to come back to that value and purpose, and really look at a client's goals and try and do everything that you can to help them achieve those goals, rather than using their funding just to do, like, it's good to do fun things every now and then, but you've got to build some structure into your support hours so that you're proving to the NDIS that you are helping them to achieve their goals, and you've got to have evidence of how you've done that. And the only way you get the evidence is by doing it. And look, sometimes that's a harder job, doing it like that, but I look at it and it's good money. Do the harder job and you'll get the best reward and the best results for the client, because at the end of the day, it's about them.
It is, yes.
So, like, I think I told you that when SBS did the documentary on George, the name of that series inside Australia was called Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things. Well, the name of Hoppy Indy Adventures is because Hoppy Indy was a word that he made up. It was his happy word. He used it in a song. He used it all the time. And I wanted to put that as a legacy to him, which is where I became Hoppy Indy Adventures. But I flipped that SBS saying around, and I call my business Empowering Extraordinary People to Do Ordinary Things. And that comes back to the lawnmower story. It's the ordinary things that give them pleasure. So that's the logo of my business, empowering extraordinary people to do ordinary things.
That's brilliant. That is so good, because and it's giving them the skills and knowledge that they can do it.
That's correct.
So brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Jennifer. That was amazing. There's so much gold out there for everyone.
It's a
Everything,
pleasure.
even like, I love the ladder, the way to
Yes.
help people to push themselves. That was really good. And how to
Yes.
do a bit of self-care, how to look after yourself when you're having a difficult period while you're at work, and
Yes.
so we can decrease the risk of burnout, was fantastic. And I hope everyone will put a link in for George's documentary.
Yes.
So we can have a look at it. That would be gold. So we can pass it around, because it's really good to see that what you can achieve, what is possible.
Yes.
Isn't it? It's everything's possible. So thank you
Yes.
so much for your time, Jennifer.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure.
All the best, and
Okay.
thank you from all the Support Worker Club and being our community builder show today. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Take care.
Thanks, Phill. See you. Bye.
Bye bye.